The courtroom buzzed quietly as people filed into the heavy wooden benches. The air felt tense, thick with expectation, as if everyone already knew something unusual was about to happen. Sundar Pichai sat silently on the defendant's side, dressed in the simplest gray suit. He looked calm, composed, and strangely peaceful for someone who had been publicly summoned. A soft light from the high windows above cast shadows on the side of his face. His hands were folded neatly on his lap, his posture respectful, humble. Not what most would expect from the CEO of one of the most powerful tech empires in the world. No media cameras were allowed inside, but outside it was chaos. Protesters, reporters, tech bloggers, and influencers shouted over each other. Rumors were flying like birds trapped in a storm. Some claimed Sundar had broken privacy laws. Others insisted this was politically motivated. But inside, Sundar remained, still, barely blinking, as though he was listening to something no one else could hear. The judge, a man named Walter Keene, entered with exaggerated authority. He was known for his harsh demeanor, especially when dealing with powerful men. Former corporate lawyer, Judge Keene had made it his mission to show that no one, not even billionaires, were above the law. Today, he had a chance to prove that, and he relished it. He adjusted his robes dramatically and looked down over his glasses at Sundar. "Mr. Pichai," he said with a tone soaked in sarcasm, "I assume you've read the charges?" Sundar nodded, once softly. "Yes, Your Honor." The judge leaned back in his chair, almost theatrically. "Then you're aware you've been accused of willful negligence, violating user consent protocols and the collection of biometric data on a mass scale." He paused, letting the gravity sink in for the court. "If proven, this could result in a $10 billion penalty and possible prison time." A murmur ran through the courtroom like a gust of wind before a thunderstorm. Sundar's lawyer, a woman named Sonia Menon, shifted in her seat, but didn't interrupt. Her eyes were fixed on Sundar, watching his every move, knowing he had asked for something unprecedented to speak for himself. Judge Keene continued, "This court finds it ... interesting that someone of your stature has chosen not to be represented by your usual high-priced legal team. Care to explain?" Sundar raised his eyes. "I believe this situation is about trust. And if I am to ask the public for trust, I must be willing to answer for myself." The judge smirked, noble. "But this isn't a TED Talk, Mr. Pichai. It's a courtroom." That line earned some chuckles from the public gallery, but Sundar didn't flinch. Instead, he turned his head slowly and looked around at the people. Watching, his eyes settled on a young boy in the back row, clinging to his mother's side. Their clothes were simple, worn. The boy's eyes met Sundar's. He wasn't judging. He wasn't afraid. He just looked ... curious. Sundar smiled gently and then turned back to face the judge. "Your Honor." Sundar began softly. "Before we proceed, may I share something? Not as a defense, but as context." Judge Keene narrowed his eyes. "This isn't story hour, Mr. Pichai. It's not a story. It's a memory." Something in his tone silenced the room. Even the judge hesitated. After a moment, he waved his hand. "You have 5 minutes." Sundar took a deep breath. 25 years ago, he began. "I was a young engineer living in a cramped room in Chennai. We didn't have a computer at home. We didn't even have reliable electricity. My father, who worked as an electrical engineer, used to save coins for months just to take me to an internet cafe once a week. We'd sit for 30 minutes. He couldn't understand the interface, but he watched me click through pages as though I was entering another world." A hush fell over the courtroom. No one moved. One day, Sundar continued, I asked him why he kept doing it, spending so much on those visits. He said, "Because one day you'll build something that matters. And when you do, don't forget what it cost us to dream." His voice cracked just slightly, but he didn't look away. "Everything I've done since then, every product, every policy was born from that place. Not greed, not ambition, but responsibility." The judge scoffed lightly. "And yet you stand here, accused of violating that very responsibility. Sonia stood up then, holding a folder tightly in her hands. Your Honor, may I present evidence? You may, the judge muttered. She walked forward, placing the folder on the bench. Inside, you will find a whistleblower statement from the company's internal security lead, confirming that the alleged data collection system was initiated without the knowledge or approval of Mr. Pichai. The executive in charge has since been terminated, and a full audit was launched before this court summons even went public. The judge opened the folder, flipping quickly, his brows furrowed. Sundar sat silently, watching, not defending, just waiting. But the judge wasn't finished with his game. He closed the folder sharply. So you claim ignorance? You claim that the CEO of the most data-sensitive company in the world didn't know about a massive breach of user trust under his nose? Sundar didn't move. I claim, he said, that leadership is not about knowing everything. It's about what you do the moment you find out something is wrong. The judge leaned forward. And what did you do? I paused operations, Sundar said. I sent letters of apology to every employee and user affected. And I flew to the home of a single mother in Iowa who had written to me about her son's compromised information. Not because it was required, but because it was right. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. Full of something. Unexpected. Respect. But the judge wasn't ready to let go. This court doesn't run on sentiment. Pichai, he said. It runs on law. And tomorrow morning you will return here to answer every technical allegation in full. And if I find even a shred of dishonesty, you will be held accountable. I expect nothing less, Sundar replied. Quietly, the judge's gavel slammed down. Court is adjourned for the day. As everyone began to stand, a voice from the back rose. Clear, young, and unexpected. Sir ... Are you really him? It was the boy. The one Sundar had looked at earlier. His mother tried to hush him, but Sundar turned and smiled. Depends. He said gently, Who do you think I am? The boy blinked, then whispered, The man who made the phone that helped my mom find work? Sundar's eyes softened. And in that small moment, the courtroom wasn't a battlefield. It was a place where truth and humanity quietly met. But outside, things were far from peaceful. An anonymous source had just leaked documents to a major news outlet, claiming Sundar had personally signed off on the project. The headlines were about to explode. And the judge was watching it all unfold. With a wicked glint in his eye. Asterisk, the leak that changed everything the next morning came with the weight of 1,000 whispers. News vans surrounded the courthouse, like vultures circling something they didn't fully understand, but wanted to devour anyway. The air was filled with camera flashes and the constant buzz of reporters shouting questions no one was answering. The leaked documents from the anonymous source had gone viral overnight, triggering outrage, suspicion, and a whirlwind of opinions. Headlines screamed accusations. Social media boiled with hashtags. Everyone had something to say, even those who didn't know what was really going on. Inside the courthouse, things were quieter but far more dangerous. Judge Keene sat already at the bench, flipping through the newly admitted documents like a predator sensing blood. The courtroom hadn't even been called into session yet, but his focus was razor sharp, and his eyes carried the cold gleam of a man who believed he had just uncovered a fatal flaw in a story. Sundar entered moments later. Still calm, still composed, but there was a new weight in his step. His lawyer, Sonia, walked beside him. She had barely spoken that morning. Instead, she had spent hours analyzing every line of the leak, trying to understand who would want to frame Sundar, and why now. Of all times, as they reached their table, Sundar placed a small, folded note in front of him. It wasn't from a legal file or a strategic document. It was the thank you letter he'd received years ago, from a woman whose son had received a free Chromebook after a school grant program Sundar personally pushed through. The letter reminded him that the work they did mattered, far beyond stock. Prices or product launches? He needed that reminder today. Court was called into session. Judge Keene didn't waste a second. Mr. Pichai, before we proceed with your prepared defense, We have new evidence submitted to the court, he said, holding up the leaked documents. Do you recognize this? Sundar looked at them carefully. I do, he said, but I must state clearly, Your Honor, that document is incomplete and taken out of context. The judge raised an eyebrow, pretending surprise. Incomplete? This appears to show your personal signature on a directive authorizing the exact system. In question, the biometric consent bypass initiative. Your initials? Your timestamp? Your approval? Sundar's jaw tightened slightly. He looked at Sonia, who gave a near imperceptible nod. He turned back to the judge. That document is real, Sundar said quietly. But it's not what it appears to be. The directive was signed to initiate a research phase under strict legal compliance, not full deployment. The misuse happened months later, and without my knowledge. Convenient explanation, the judge replied, voice thick with sarcasm. And this alleged research phase, was it reviewed by legal, by the ethics board, or by any third-party observers? Sundar reached into his briefcase and pulled out a worn binder. It wasn't sleek or high-tech. It looked old, used, and filled with handwritten notes. He handed it to the bailiff, who brought it to the judge. That binder contains meeting minutes, emails, and compliance feedback from the internal committee. You'll see my signature there, yes, but you'll also see 3 conditions I personally added, including full user consent protocols before any data collection would begin. The judge flipped through the binder slowly. His face remained unreadable, but the way he tapped his finger against the page revealed a flicker of frustration. He had hoped to corner Sundar with the leak. Instead, he was now face-to-face with a paper trail that told a different story. But he wasn't giving up. Tell me, Mr. Pichai, he said, why would someone leak only the first part of that document? Why not the entire thing? I've been asking myself the same question, Sundar replied, but I think the answer is simple. Someone wanted to damage trust, not reveal truth. The judge leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. You're implying sabotage. I'm implying fear, Sundar said. Someone in my own circle, or perhaps outside it, is afraid of what we're building, or afraid of what we've refused to build. His words hung heavy in the room, and just then, Sonia stood. Your Honor, she said firmly, we have filed a subpoena request to trace the source of the leak. Early indications show it may have originated from an international server cluster in Zurich, used only by our board's private communication network. That system is limited to 7 individuals. The judge narrowed his eyes. Are you accusing someone on your own board? I'm not accusing anyone, Sundar said, but I won't ignore the truth if it leads there. It was the first time in the hearing that the judge looked unsettled. He closed the binder slowly and looked directly at Sundar. I'll grant your subpoena request. But know this, if you're playing a game, it ends with you in prison. I'm not playing anything, Sundar said. I'm rebuilding something. A moment of silence passed. Then the judge looked out at the gallery. Court is in recess until tomorrow. I want that subpoena report by morning. And Mr. Pichai, be ready to explain why the person behind this leak would try to destroy you now. As the gavel struck, Sundar exhaled. He and Sonia walked out through the side exit. Cameras immediately surrounded them, but Sundar didn't stop. He just kept walking. He wasn't running from the noise. He was walking towards something else, nothing no one else could see yet, that evening, as the sun sank behind city towers. And the courthouse lights dimmed. A man in a gray hoodie stepped into an underground garage and made a call from a secure line. He survived the leak. The voice on the other end said. The man smiled faintly. Don't worry. That was only the beginning. Asterisk shadows from within had fallen. But Sundar didn't sleep. The quiet of his apartment in downtown San Francisco wrapped around him like a fragile cocoon. But his mind raced restlessly through corridors of doubt, suspicion, and memories. Outside, the city moved on. People laughed in restaurants. Headlights slid through the streets, and office windows still glowed from tech giants working late. But inside, Sundar sat at his kitchen table, a pot of untouched tea going cold in front of him. staring at his old notebook filled with hand-drawn diagrams and quotes from his early engineering days. He always returned to this notebook during times of crisis, not for answers, but for grounding. His phone buzzed. It was Sonia. You should rest, she said, her voice low and firm through the speaker. Tomorrow will be worse. I know, he replied. But I think we're missing something. Someone knew exactly what to leak, when to leak it, and how to weaponize it. That's not random sabotage. It's strategy. There was a pause on the line. Then Sonia whispered, You think someone close to you is behind it? Sundar didn't answer immediately. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a photo. It was taken 12 years ago at one of the earliest leadership retreats, back when Google still felt like a scrappy startup dressed in a grown-up suit. In the photo were 6 people: Sundar, Sonia, a few senior engineers, and a man named Kevin Rayner, the former head of platform strategy and once one of Sundar's most trusted advisors. Kevin was brilliant, sharp, visionary, but also hungry. And 4 years ago, he had left the company under vague circumstances. No public fallout, no lawsuits. Just a quiet departure that Sundar had insisted remain dignified. He didn't believe in burning bridges. But some bridges burn themselves. Think we need to talk to Kevin, Sundar said. Sonia exhaled slowly. You think he still holds a grudge? I think he holds more than that, Sundar said quietly. He always hated how I handled data transparency, said I was too soft, too slow. He wanted to move fast, too fast. I'll reach out through unofficial channels, Sonia said, but be careful. If Kevin is involved, this won't stop at leaked documents. As he ended the call, Sundar stood and walked to the window. Below, the city shimmered with opportunity and danger. And in that moment, he realized something. This wasn't just about a court case. This was about everything he had spent his life building. Not just Google, not just Chrome, but trust. And someone wanted to rip that trust apart the next morning. Came like a slap. Court resumed with tension thick enough to choke. Every seat was filled. Even the security guards stood more alert than usual. The air carried the scent of perfume, sweat, and anticipation, a strange cocktail of public spectacle. And private agendas. Judge Keene entered, face unreadable. He adjusted his robes, looked down at the files before him, and then did something unexpected. He called Sonia to the front. You filed a subpoena yesterday, he said, and received preliminary results overnight. Have you reviewed them? Yes. Your Honor, she said, and we would like to submit a motion to request immediate access to the internal communications of Mr. Kevin Rayner, former executive of the defendant's corporation. A murmur rippled across the room. The name hit like a thunderclap. On what grounds? Judge Keene asked, eyebrows raised. On the grounds that the leak originated from an encrypted relay server last accessed from Zurich, Switzerland, a location known to be associated with Mr. Rayner's private investment firm, founded after his resignation. The judge flipped through the digital printouts handed to him. This doesn't prove he sent the leak. No, Sonia said, but it proves he had access. And we believe further investigation will show motive. What motive would he have? The judge asked, now clearly engaged. Sundar stood slowly. Years ago, he began. We had an argument, not about money, but about ethics. Kevin wanted to license a predictive algorithm to governments around the world. He said it would change policing, education, even voting. I said no. I said it was too dangerous, too easy to misuse. He said I would regret it. The courtroom was utterly still. 2 weeks later, he resigned. Judge Keene nodded once. Very well. I'll allow the motion. But we're still here to investigate your role, Mr. Pichai. The court doesn't pause for ghosts. I understand, Sundar said. But ghostly fingerprints, too. Court recessed for an hour. During the break, Sundar stepped outside the courtroom to breathe. The fresh air hit his face like water, and for a moment, he just closed his eyes. But when he opened them, someone was waiting near the steps. It was a woman in her 60s holding a phone. She looked nervous but determined. Are you Sundar Pichai? She asked. He nodded. I used to work at your call center in Bangalore, she said softly. Years ago. I just wanted to say thank you. The company gave me health care when my daughter was sick. She survived because of that. I don't know what they're saying about you, but I believe in what you've done. Sundar's throat tightened. He reached out, gently touched her hand, and said, Thank you. I won't forget. He watched her walk away, her simple sorry, fluttering in the breeze. Moments later, his phone buzzed. It was a private number. He answered, cautiously. Hello? A familiar voice came through the line, deep, calm, and chilling. You should have let the world move on, Sundar. Now you've dragged us both back into the fire. It was Kevin Rayner. I don't want to fight, Sundar said, tone steady. Too late, Kevin replied. And just so you know, this trial. It's just the preview. The call ended, but the message had been received. The next battle was already unfolding. And it would not be inside a courtroom. Asterisk. The power behind the Kurtangiv and Rayner's voice lingered in Sundar's mind long after the call had ended. Not because it was threatening, but because it was familiar. Not the voice itself, but the calm arrogance behind it. It was the same tone Kevin used years ago during a heated debate over the future of artificial intelligence. Back then, he spoke of control, of harnessing data not to empower people, but to predict them, to engineer choices before people even made them. And Sundar had said no. He remembered the moment clearly, even now, like it had just happened yesterday. Kevin had leaned in across the table and whispered, Then you're not building the future. You're just reacting to it. Double quotes now. Kevin was back. And he wasn't just reacting. He was attacking. Back inside the courtroom, Judge Keene resumed the session with a colder tone. He'd reviewed the evidence. He'd read the messages. And while the new trail toward Kevin Rayner intrigued him, it didn't absolve Sundar. Not yet. Mr. Pichai, the judge began. While this court acknowledges the emerging direction of the subpoena investigation, you remain under scrutiny for failing to prevent this alleged breach of user consent. Negligence, even if unintentional, has consequences. Sundar stood again, his shoulders squared, his voice low and firm. I understand, Your Honor. But this is no longer about oversight. It's about orchestration. Someone manufactured a narrative, then released just enough evidence to support it. Not to seek justice, but to ruin reputations. The judge gave a skeptical glance. You're asking this court to believe you're the victim of a strategic takedown? I'm not asking for sympathy, Sundar replied. I'm asking for the truth to be investigated completely, not selectively. Sonia stepped forward next with a new folder. She had worked tirelessly through the night alongside a private forensic team. She placed the documents on the judge's bench. Your Honor, she said, this contains metadata logs showing that the leaked directive was altered before being sent to the press. The timestamp of the original approval was changed. Keywords like test phase and restricted were removed. And the forwarding address used to leak the document belongs to a shell company registered to Rayner Investments. That name. Again, it struck like a match. Judge Keene didn't respond right away. He read silently, carefully, flipping through the evidence while the courtroom held its collective breath. When he looked up, his eyes were different. Less confrontational, more analytical. I'll allow a temporary delay in the technical testimony, he said. We will pivot to witness statements, beginning with Mr. Pichai's internal team, anyone who was present during the projects. Early phase. Sundar gave a slow nod. Thank you, Your Honor. Later that day, the first witness was called Jaya Menendez, a senior engineer who had worked closely with both Sundar and Kevin. She was quiet but sharp, known within the company. For her integrity, she sat in the witness stand, took the oath, and met the judge's gaze with steady eyes. Miss Menendez, the judge said, you were present during the biometric project's inception. Did Mr. Pichai instruct or authorize its deployment without user consent? No, she said firmly. In fact, he halted progress when concerns were raised. I was in the meeting. I saw the expression on his face. He didn't just disagree with Kevin, he was disturbed by what was being proposed. And did Mr. Rayner take that as a final decision? The judge asked. Jaya hesitated. Then she said something that made the room go silent. Bo quotes no. He took it as a challenge. Judge Keene leaned forward. Can you clarify? Kevin believed that limitations were obstacles, not boundaries. He thought compliance was optional if you were clever enough to hide behind systems and layers of contractors. When Sundar refused to give approval, Kevin created a shadow team, a group operating parallel to the official team. And I believe that's where this breach began. The courtroom buzzed. Sundar didn't look surprised, but he did look sad. There was a time when he believed people like Kevin could be redirected, inspired, reminded of humanity. Now he saw the cost of that belief. Outside the courtroom, reporters scrambled to update their stories. Headlines shifted from CEO under fire to insider sabotage suspected. But deeper forces were already in motion. In a high-rise office across the city, Kevin Rayner stood by the window, holding a tumbler of scotch, watching the skyline. He turned to a woman seated on the couch behind him, Eloise Bain, a powerful lobbyist with deep connections in Washington and Silicon Valley. He's surviving longer than I thought, Kevin said, voice even. For now, Eloise replied. But you've already planted the doubt, and public trust, once cracked, doesn't repair easily. We need to accelerate, Kevin said. Leak the second set. Eloise raised an eyebrow. That's risky. So is changing the world, Kevin whispered. Back in the courtroom. Jaya's statement had shifted the tone of the proceedings. Judge Keene looked less interested in condemning and more interested in understanding. He ordered a deeper investigation into the internal structure of the project, requesting full access to all correspondence involving both Sundar and Kevin from the last 5 years. Sonia nodded in approval. But she also knew they were racing against something bigger than court deadlines. Because if Kevin had one leak, he likely had more. And if he was willing to distort one truth, he could distort others. As the court adjourned for the day, Sundar stepped outside and was immediately approached by a journalist, a young woman, barely 25, holding a trembling mic. Mr. Pichai, she asked breathlessly. What would you say to the millions of users watching this, trying to decide whether you're a villain or a victim? Sundar paused. Then he looked straight into her eyes and said quietly, I'd ask them to watch, not judge. I'd ask them to remember that silence doesn't always mean guilt, and that sometimes the loudest voice isn't the one telling the truth. That clip would go viral within the hour. And deep in a secure server, Kevin Rayner's team was preparing the next wave of deception, a manipulated video, designed to appear like Sundar admitting guilt during a closed-door board meeting. The trap was set. In this time, it was personal, asterisk, the fabricated confession be, the time the courtroom opened the next morning. The entire world had already seen the clip. A blurry video, shot from the side of a dimly lit conference room, showed Sundar sitting at the head of a long table. His voice was low, but the captions were loud. We'll roll it out quietly. No need for user permission if it's framed under testing. They won't notice, and if they do, we'll deal with it later. It spread like wildfire. Every social media platform, every news channel, every influencer, every podcast. The tone shifted overnight. Support turned to doubt. Empathy turned to suspicion. Even his most loyal followers were unsure. The hashtags changed. Hashtag Trust Sundar became #exposed the truth. It was the moment Kevin Rayner had planned for. But Sundar didn't flinch. Not in public. Not even as he watched his image being dissected by a billion eyes. He walked into the courthouse with his head held high, flanked by Sonia and a newly appointed digital forensics expert, a man named Dr. Rahim Sharma, a quiet genius with a background in media manipulation and signal integrity. He wasn't just here to defend Sundar. He was here to dismantle the lie. Inside the courtroom, Judge Keene sat like a man ready for war. The clip had shaken him too. He didn't speak immediately. He let the tension settle like a weight on every chest. "Mr. Pichai," the judge said. Slowly. "Care to explain the video that the entire world has now seen?" Sonia stood first. "Your Honor, we ask that the video be treated as inadmissible until it is verified through an independent forensic analysis." "We believe it to be fabricated." The judge raised an eyebrow. "You're claiming deepfake?" Dr. Rahim stepped forward, nodding respectfully. "Not exactly, Your Honor. It's worse than that." He walked to the display screen in the courtroom and pulled up the video. Then he layered it with waveforms. Audio, visual, pixel shifts. "This footage," he began, "was created using genuine frames from a real board meeting. However, the audio track has been surgically reconstructed using artificial intelligence, trained on hundreds of hours of Mr. Pichai's voice across public interviews, presentations, and internal recordings. This method is known as neural voice splicing." He clicked to the next slide, revealing side-by-side comparisons of audio frequencies. Real speech has fluctuation, breathing rhythm, emotional cues. This track has none. It's mathematically perfect, which means it's unnatural. The creators used a script, fed it into an AI engine, and laid it over repurposed video frames. The result is convincing to the eye, but not to the truth. The courtroom was dead silent. Even Judge Keene leaned forward, no longer masking his interest. "And can you prove it definitively?" The judge asked. "Yes, Dr. Rahim said. "The metadata contains digital watermarks from an editing suite called EtherEdit, a tool not publicly available. It's used by elite-level operators, government, high-end forgers, or private security contractors." He paused. "We traced the software license. It belongs to a company recently acquired by Rayner Investments." Gasps filled the courtroom. Sundar remained still, not smug, not angry. Just ... steady. Judge Keene rubbed his temples. "So you're telling me this entire thing, the leaks, the documents, the video, has all been orchestrated?" Sonia nodded. "We believe this is an attack designed not to prove guilt, but to fabricate it." The judge slammed his gavel down. "This court will suspend further technical review until the Federal Cyber Investigation Unit can verify these findings." He looked at Sundar. "You were right," he said slowly. "This trial was never about negligence. It was about power. Outside the courtroom, the narrative had shifted again, violently this time. The video, once viral, now collapsed under expert scrutiny. Newscasters scrambled to update their segments. Headlines shifted from tech titan exposed to CEO targeted in deepfake scandal. But for Sundar, it wasn't over, because somewhere deep in the digital shadows, Kevin Rayner was watching. And he wasn't done. In a private underground server room, Kevin sat in front of dozens of screens, lines of code racing across the displays. Next to him, Eloise Bain tapped her fingers against a glass table. "You lost the public," she said. "Not yet," Kevin replied. "They'll forget the forensics in a week, but I've got something else." "What now?" she asked, impatient. Kevin turned one screen around. On it was a live feed of a private hospital room in Munich. A man lay in bed, hooked to tubes, unconscious. His name was Dr. Hans Ziegler, the original ethics officer who had reviewed the biometric project years ago, the one person outside the company who could verify Sundar's innocence and Kevin's manipulation. "He's waking up soon," Kevin said. "If he talks, we're finished." Eloise narrowed her eyes. "Then he can't wake up." Kevin stood, his face expressionless. "This is no longer just about Sundar. It's about what kind of world we want. If he wins, it's back to slow progress, accountability, ethics. If I win, we create the future on our terms." Meanwhile, Sundar sat in his office that evening, watching the city lights flicker. He finally allowed himself to feel. He thought of his mother's tiny kitchen in Chennai, of the steam from the boiling chai, of his father's hands, worn, cracked, always working. He remembered the dreams that began in silence, the sacrifices no one had seen. And he thought of the users, the child in a remote village connecting to a virtual classroom, the struggling father navigating a healthcare form online, the single mother applying for her first remote job. That was who he had built for. And that was who you would fight for. Sonia entered quietly. She had been crying, just a little. "You're being summoned to a closed session," she said. "Judge Keene wants a direct testimony before making a ruling on the motion to dismiss." "Tonight?" Sundar asked. "Tonight?" she replied. "He says he's tired of theatrics. He wants the real story." Sundar stood, buttoned his coat, and grabbed the notebook he always carried. "Then let's give it to him." As they left the room, his phone buzzed again. A block number. He answered. Data voice whispered, "If you mention Hans Siegler in court, he won't make it through the night." The line went dead. Sundar stopped walking. He looked at Sonia, his eyes dark with a decision that carried more weight than any court ruling. Because now, he wasn't just defending himself, he was deciding how far he'd go to protect the truth. And what price he was willing to pay for justice. Asterisk truth. On the record, the hallway leading to Judge Keene's private chamber was quiet, almost sacred. The echoes of distant footfalls were muffled by the weight of what was about to happen. Sundar walked slowly, each step deliberate, as if he were walking through the final chapter of a story he never chose to write, but one he knew he had to finish. Beside him, Sonia said nothing. Her presence alone was enough. Behind them, the soft hum of legal assistants and court officers faded into silence as they reached the heavy oak door inside. The room was nothing like the grand courtroom. It was intimate, plain, a wooden table, no audience, no cameras, just Judge Keene, seated at the head, flanked by two clerks. A single recording device blinking red on the table. "Mr. Pichai," Keene said, gesturing to the seat across from him. "Please, sit." Sundar did not. The judge leaned forward, eyes wary but sharp. "I've read the evidence, the manipulated clip, the forged documents, your team's forensic reports. It all paints a picture of an orchestrated takedown. But I need to hear it from you, not as a CEO, not as a strategist, but as a human being." Sundar didn't hesitate. He opened his notebook, not to read from it, but to keep it near, a reminder where he started. He took a breath and began. "Your Honor," he said softly, "I was born in a small home with limited means. We didn't have a refrigerator until I was 12, but we had values. My father taught me the power of knowledge. My mother taught me the strength of silence. And from the day I touched my first computer, I knew technology could be more than machines. It could be bridges." "Judge?" Keene nodded slowly, but said nothing. "When I became CEO," Sundar continued, "I wasn't just leading a company. I was inheriting a responsibility to build tools that didn't exploit people, but empowered them. And every decision I made was shaped by that." He leaned forward slightly, locking eyes with the judge. "So when I saw what Kevin Rayner was, proposing a system that could scan people's faces and bodies without consent, track their behavior without disclosure, I said no. Not because it would fail, but because it would succeed too well. It would give power without limits. And we've seen what that kind of power does to people." The room was still. Sundar's voice dropped, filled with quiet intensity. "Kevin didn't just disagree. He believed I was weak, that ethics were obstacles. So he left. And now he's back, not to correct a wrong, but to punish a choice." Judge Keene finally spoke. "And the threats, are they real?" Sundar reached into his coat pocket and placed his phone on the table. "Listen to this," he said. He tapped play. The room filled with the eerie voice of the anonymous caller. "Have you mentioned Hans Siegler in court? He won't make it through the night." The judge's eyes darkened. Sundar continued. "Doctor, Hans Siegler is the one man who can confirm every step of this timeline. He was the external reviewer. He documented everything. And now, he's in a hospital bed unconscious because someone made sure he couldn't speak. And yet, the judge said, you still came here. Because silence is more dangerous, Sundar replied. If we stay quiet every time power tries to rewrite the story, then the truth becomes a rumor. And I won't live in a world built on rumors. A long pause followed. Then the judge stood. Thank you, Mr. Pichai. This record will be sealed for now, pending our ruling. But I want you to know, this has changed the way I see this case. And you, Sundar nodded. That's all I hoped for. They exited the room. By the time he stepped outside, it was already morning again. The sun was rising over San Francisco, soft orange light painting the glass towers gold. Sundar looked up, blinking against the brightness. A message buzzed on his phone. From an unknown number. He's awake. Hans Siegler had regained consciousness. Within an hour. He had provided a sworn statement to international investigators, detailing the original biometric protocol review, the conditions Sundar had set, the ethical barriers Kevin had tried to erase, and the internal memos Hans had archived in a personal drive for protection. The case collapsed like a house of cards. Kevin Rader was arrested within 2 days, charged with digital fraud, attempted obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to defame. Eloise Bain disappeared. Her firm dissolved overnight. Rumors of offshore accounts and buried evidence surfaced, but by then, the public had turned, not just back to Sundar, but back to truth. Judge Keene publicly dismissed the charges and issued a rare apology in court. Mr. Pichai, he said, before a full courtroom and flashing cameras, in all my years on the bench, I'd learned that not every case is about crime. Some are about courage, and you've shown plenty. The courtroom erupted in applause, but Sundar simply nodded. No pride, no arrogance, just quiet humility, because he knew this wasn't a victory. It was a warning. Weeks later, Sundar sat on a park bench outside a school, watching a group of kids build a small robot from recycled parts. One of the girls, maybe 11 years old, turned and smiled at him. Are you the guy from the internet? He smiled. Some days. She handed him the robot. We named it Truthy. It only speaks if you feed it real data. He chuckled. Smart idea. We built it in our free class, she said. We got laptops from your company. My mom says you saved our school. Sundar looked down at the tiny robot in his hands. It was simple, imperfect, but it worked. Actually, he said gently, you saved yourselves. We just gave you the tools. And as he handed the robot back, he realized something, no matter how powerful the liars were. The truth always found a way to speak, even if it needed to come from a child. Asterisk.